Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome or welcome back, as the case might be. My name is Dalibor Petrovic, and I'm a host of these TechTonic Conversations. Today, on this fine Tuesday, January 21st, 2025, we have a very, very interesting, relevant, timely, important conversation about digital transformation and investments into digital transformations, both investments that have been tracked and captured over the last couple of years, but very importantly, what we believe will be the nature of investments in 2025 and beyond. And to share this with us, I have a phenomenal panel that we assembled today. First and foremost, I'd like to welcome back Diana Cairns-Manolatos. Diana is a leader of Deloitte's Global Research Center for Innovative Research based out of New York. Thank you very much, Diana, for joining us. I'm also thrilled to welcome Iram Parveen, a Deloitte researcher who is joining us today all the way from Delhi in India. And I would also like to welcome Tim Smith, a principal in Deloitte US and the leader of Deloitte US's technology strategy and business transformation practice. So world-class team to share the latest world-class research today with us. So with that, I want to be very quick and jump straight into the topic. Tim, I believe you will be the first to kick us off. So Tim, thank you very much. Over to you.
All right, I'll grab the mic, Dalibor. Thank you very much. Happy Tuesday to everybody. Hopefully it's not too cold where you're at. It's freezing here in New York. But just a bit more of my background. So yes, Tim Smith. I've been with our firm at Deloitte for some time, always tackling in one way, shape, or form the promise and potential of technology, whether it's figuring out what to do with it and whether it aligns with the ultimate shareholder value case, to selecting the technologies and then implementing them at scale. So very close to my heart. And I've had the privilege to work with Diana and Iram and others over the past about 3 years, to not only talk about technology, but to ladder it back to really understand technology's role in digital transformation, but more importantly, even agnostic to technology. What is digital transformation? What does it mean to all of us? And how do we just make sense of it? So what we try to show here in the iconography is the fact that we've been on a journey at Deloitte to understand a few things regarding digital transformation. First and foremost, how we define it. To us, digital transformation is the application of technology in the face of growth and competitive advantage, simply put. It's not chasing logos for logo's sake. It's not changing for change's sake. It's ultimately understanding via shareholder, stakeholder value, and ultimately what they need to see in terms of growth, new markets, new channels, et cetera, what needs to come together on the back of or the promise of technology. And technology is broad, right? There's certainly the old faithful technologies that we have, BDRP, et cetera. There's new technology domains, everything AI. But at the end of the day, when we took on this research and we first defined it, the big thing for us is there's really no distance between corporate and digital strategy, corporate transformation and digital transformation. So first things first was to help demystify it. We then spent some time, and Diana will take this through in a bit, as to what the types of digital transformations are out there. And then as leaders, CEOs in particular, ultimately, what do they do to tackle these digital transformations? And then we spent a lot of time really looking at the data, the crunchy analysis to understand, based off what people do, how do they increase the odds of success in such a multivariate, multiplex solution, that being digital transformation? What do you have to get right in terms of not only your strategy, but the technology you select, the incentives you set, the horizons you plan for, the optionality you build in, all of that stuff? How does that assemble together again to really make it so that any digital transformation that comes across your desk, you know how to either accept, reject, or shape? And that's what we want to talk to you today about. So we've gone on this journey to, again, define what digital transformation is and give some of the data behind the moves to make. About a year and a half ago, we then decided to contextualize it for a host of sectors, a host of archetypes. Why is that? Back to the multiplex discussion. If you're trying to take on a digital transformation, it's one thing for Diana, Niram, and Tim to say, okay, look, these are the types you should take on. It's another to say, but these are probably more relevant to you based off your spend, based off your sector, based off the technology estate you may or may not have. So we spent some time surveying across the globe exactly what those dimensions are, such that people could have quasi sort of benchmarks out there to take a look. I wouldn't certify, but it's enough to give you some direction. That's available for people to see. But what was most important is to start building in the longitudinal analysis for all of that. And that's what we're going to talk about today. As we spent and focused about a year and a half ago as to where people were investing, we then wanted to see if any of that has changed over time. We released a report around October or so last year, basically refreshing those stats. And we want to walk you through generally the headlines. You can see here on the right-hand side, ultimately what went into that. About 400 US respondents this time. We wanted to keep it very, very targeted. We ironed out exactly what was changing in terms of their budget and their priorities. We ironed out a bit exactly how much of that spend was dedicated to digital transformation. And then we really try to get into the guts as to what those signals are, as to how bold digital transformations may or may not be, and sort of the tips and tricks and challenges throughout. So that is the backdrop on our journey. I'm going to start jumping into the headlines, but it has been a robust one, let's put it that way.
And all of the material that you shared is freely accessible on Deloitte's Insights, which we will share at the end of this presentation, the QR code, except for the book, the physical book, which I'm going to say, I have it here, the digital.
I have it here as well. That's right.
Yep. There we go. So yes, from our common friend, Dr. Tim Botke. Yes.
Absolutely right. And we'll remind everybody at the end as well, but there's quite the library to go through to make it that much better for you, and a lot of slices that you can use now. Excellent. All right, so let's jump into it. So as mentioned, we have about 400 different respondents that we looked at. We looked at consumer, what we call ER&I, energy, resources, and industrials, which can be a broad grouping for sure. Financial services, which is typically banking, capital markets, investment management. Life sciences, healthcare, both plan and provider on healthcare, life sciences, whether biotech or broader pharma. And then technology, media, and telecommunications, also another big tent, especially with how you define media, where sports shows up, which shows up there, et cetera. But we wanted to start moving on this. It's not something we did in our initial survey, but we tried to really step back and say, okay, if we're going to set the stage in terms of the qualitative findings regarding digital transformation, again, how bold are they going to be? What types of technologies are they taking on? What does it mean to their operating model? All that good stuff. Is there any quantitative we can put against it? It's tough because not everybody is that robust on holding on to exactly the business cases they form for digital transformation, nor are they, unfortunately, that robust in tracking exactly the value metrics embedded in there and how they show up. But we wanted to start giving everybody an idea of generally the tonnage of spend associated with it. So the way to interpret this view is simply put, asking those enterprises out of the 400 what their average revenue is. And then out of that, how much they are dedicating in terms of overall budget to quote unquote digital transformation. So this will give you an idea. And like I said, I wouldn't use this as an absolute benchmark, but again, as a direction, use this over time as we get more and more historical data points. But as you can see, no matter how you slice this, IT is still relied upon as the primary contributor to digital transformation overall. Now, what'll be interesting, and I don't want to steal any thunder from Diana and team, but part of this discussion today is giving you an idea as to what to sense quite early on. So if someone in your enterprise is coming to you saying they have a digital transformation, that's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and it's going to reinvent the enterprise, and all these things are going to happen. Well, if that is the case, does that make sense in terms of how, at least in the aggregate, digital transformation investment dynamics are playing out? What do I mean by that? Well, for example, if you're in consumer and 8% of your digital transformation is being run from the technology shop, might be fine, but one would argue that really, if it's that bold, shouldn't that be CEO led or run out of a business unit or run out of some office outside of the IT P&L, right? So we're still seeing a tendency for these digital transformations, no matter how bold they may be and how important we hear about it, not only in these discussions, the eminence that's out there, all of the market discussions. Well, those ambitions and those signals don't necessarily match where the spend is showing up within the enterprise. So that's finding number one. Let's maybe pivot to really the guts and how they show up at the various archetypes, but I thought it was useful as a backdrop to get it going. So Diana, you want to take us through the archetypes?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tim. And I think, just based on what you said and teased a little bit on the last slide, we're talking about how transformative are your ambitions related to the digital transformation. And that's exactly what this slide shows. About 2+ years ago, we spoke with 30 global CEOs and we asked them, for digital transformation, what is your ambition? And that was with the backdrop that when you said digital transformation, most organizations didn't necessarily mean the same thing. And so what we were able to do coming out of those interviews was develop this spectrum of different types of change related to investment in technologies. So on the far left here, we have the level 0 and the level 1. And that's really the digitization of data and platforms for the business, where what you're trying to do isn't necessarily all that transformative. It's focused more internally on optimizing your business processes in order to run the organization more efficiently, more effectively, to bring analog data online, and not necessarily that transformative or ambitious. On the right side here, there was a whole host of other strategies we heard those CEOs talking about related to their ambition to enter new markets, create new products, or really to fully and fundamentally transform the way that they do business. And so this is not just digitization. This is what is really truly transformative business transformation or digital business transformation. It's more externally focused, not just on process, but on products that directly touch customers and drive a different type of financial growth and value for the organization. And so building on this foundation, what we did with the first iteration of our global survey in 2023, we asked global and as well as US. And so what you're seeing here is the US slice of that data. We asked them, out of 100% of your technology budget or your digital budget, how are you allocating that across these 5 areas? And what we saw in 2023 was the bulk of that spend, 44%, was going to the level 4 change, fundamentally trying to transform the organization and the business. And so to Tim's earlier point, if we have most of the investment coming from IT and a very small part coming from the business, whether that's corporate or business units, is there enough strategic investment coming from outside of IT to achieve those ambitions? So that was 2023. And Dalibor, I see you had your hand up, so maybe I'll pause and...
I love this. This to me is an incredibly important slide. These levels are superbly important for both technology leaders and business leaders, board and executive, to actually understand. To me, this is the money slide here, and it helps. Actually, it will help in every single conversation for those who are planning to embark on what they initially intend to call digital transformation. And because, as you rightly point out, some of those digital transformations are actually not transformative at all. They are intended to digitize, optimize, automate, existing processes, existing functions, existing capabilities, and that's level 0, level 1. And but as you move to the right, of course, the complexity increases, impact increases, the purpose of it is different, all the way to the level 4, which is truly full depth transformation. So to me, this is superbly important to have a discussion of who actually needs to champion this in the organization, who needs to be executive sponsoring this, where the investment is going to be coming from, who will be held accountable, and what is the return on investment. So to me, this is like every single digital transformation, I believe, should start with this conversation first. Right? So I loved this. Now, Diana, here is an interesting observation that I see. In 2023, 44% of respondents said they're on level 4, which is the most transformative end-to-end type of effort. But then in 2024, a year later, this shrinks to a half. And it's almost counterintuitive, isn't it? Is there a rationale? What is the rationale for that shift and change?
Yeah, thanks for calling that out. And I see that there are some questions in the chat, so please do keep them coming. But that's exactly the point, right? So we're looking at share of budget, and that really gives us an indication of where the priorities are. And so what happened 2023 to 24, as you've described, but just to elaborate a little, is we've seen a dramatic shift in those budgeting priorities away from level 4, redistributed across the entire spectrum. The majority of that has gone into the level 0 and the level 1 as the biggest beneficiary. But we also do still see the level 2 has increased by 10 percentage points in terms of budget, as well as level 3 increasing by 2 percentage points. So there is this redistribution of priorities that we can see from the budget. So what's going on here that happened from 2023 to 2024 in the technology world is the introduction of generative AI, right? And so we have a major new technology that has come in. And in terms of thinking about where and how you're budgeting for technology, I like to think about generative AI and its many types in 2 buckets. You have all of the process-focused things, where agentic AI and chatbots and a lot of the large language models and the text-focused technologies are focused. And then you have more product-focused innovation, where you are looking at integrating Gen AI into the products that you're taking to market. And so if we start to look at some of our data on Gen AI to thread the needle a little bit, we see that, you know, the number one benefit organizations hope to achieve from Gen AI is increased productivity and efficiency. And so when we start to look at all of the data we have more broadly across our technology transformation research, I think that there's a strong argument that generative AI has shifted the focus over to the left here a bit more.
This is so if you don't mind, like, I love that is actually, now that you articulated it, makes complete sense. Now, in my travels working with clients, I have also heard a version of, you know, over the last 5 years, we've made significant investments in what we call digital transformations. Many of these investments did not necessarily result in the type of impact we were expecting. And we have now come to a stage of, look, this is important, but let's actually go back to basics a little bit and rebuild our foundations. I wonder if there is an element of that influencing this as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think back to basics is a phrase that we were using when we were writing this research.
Right.
Our generative AI research as well shows consistently that data foundation is critical for anything that you want to do with digital. And that includes AI and generative AI. And I think, you know, one of the things that we've seen for the data foundations is it's not just taking the analog data and digitizing it, but it's really full data transformation. And that's the journey many organizations are going through now, is realizing that the data environments that they have created digitally for traditional AI are not necessarily fit for purpose for generative AI, right? Traditional AI is deterministic models, and they've put their data into structured environments of zeros and ones. Whereas generative AI is a probabilistic model where that richness of variability in the data is what allows it to do its job well. So there's this big opportunity and this big focus on how do we transform our data here to be able to get the benefit of what we're trying to do in terms of optimization and productivity. And that requires budget.
I think another way to look at this too is this comes up a lot when we talk about AI, Gen AI, applied AI, you name it. And some of this was in the chat. There's certain aspects, if you're looking inward, to use AI or Gen AI to make your internal processes execute that much better. That really, it still follows some of the classic things that you would need to do, right? I have to have my data curated in one place. I have to make it usable. I can't have it spread across a whole bunch of different data solutions, data marts, data warehouses, whatever you want to call it. So I have to roll up my sleeves and get that to a place in which I can actually harness the data at scale, if that's for internal productivity. Now that's made, somewhat easier if like you got an ERP that houses all of it and you're doing it on the rails there. But then there's the other aspect of AI, applied AI, setting aside everything agentic, which I know is super top of mind now, which is like you look at like a level 3, right? A lot of the value of AI and Gen AI is how you embed those into the monetizable products of your enterprise, right? So if, for example, someone's saying, I'm using AI and Gen AI to go improve my internal productivity, that's probably a level 1. If you're using AI or Gen AI to go wash over all your products, so they're that much anticipatory or leveraging your data that much better, it's probably a level 3. In the chat, depending on how bold that is, if that's going to go wash over all of your products and almost all of your products are going to be different once you use AI, Gen AI, then you're probably tipping yourself into a level 4.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of doesn't matter like as to what level it falls into, besides the fact, the theory is that if you're in level 1, the leader of that work can be someone internal within IT, right? I know the systems, I know how they tie together, I know the integrations, but you don't necessarily want someone in IT that's going to come in and tell you how your products need to change. And what we have found is, again, the sponsors of these digital transformations, with all the right intent, are you sure they're the right ones for the level ambitions that you see? So that's another way of thinking about sort of AI and Gen AI and how it needs to show up.
And Tim, there might be actually a problem then with the previous slide that showed how much budget is spent by IT versus non-IT, right? That this could be a challenge, as in like the proportion probably one would expect should be shifting so that more of that investment on levels 2, 3, and 4 intuitively ought to be coming from the business, right?
That would be our hope. Yeah, if we
that's the hope, exactly.
6 months ahead, that's what we're hoping to see.
Yeah,
it'll be very odd if not, because again, that means like something isn't clicking in the enterprise in aggregate, right? As to how this be shepherded.
Yeah. So for financial services, right, we talk about change the bank and run the bank. That's another way of thinking about it, is if all your money is focused on run the bank, we see that this is the leading industry focused on those more business line driven areas of product change, but it's still only about 4%. So I'll keep us moving to the next section of our discussion. And, for those tuning in, by no means are you expected to read every dot on this eye chart. We know it's tough, and, we'll share the QR code to the research. But just to orient you to what we have here, year over year, we asked our survey respondents about approximately 20 technologies consistently. Are you investing in these technologies? And to what extent do you believe you're gaining ROI or high value in those investments if you are investing in them? And so the opaque gray dots toward the bottom are a view of what the world looked like in 2023. There was a real breadth of technologies that we're investing in, and a pretty big disparity between the leading technologies like AI and data, excluding Gen AI at the time, and investments in cloud versus other technologies for cybersecurity or quantum computing and AR and VR. So one of the biggest takeaways we saw year over year was that all of these dots moved up significantly. And so what that means is that overall, and they move to the middle a bit. So overall, organizations are still investing in many technologies, some a little bit less and some a little bit more than others. So a movement toward the middle. But there's a significant increase across all the technologies in the perceived value of those investments. And so, back to what we've been talking about in terms of what that means for your investments and your budgeting is it's a very tough decision now of how do we continue to sustain these investments into 2025 if we're investing in a lot of things and we think that everything is adding value and there's this strain on IT to be funding it all. Where is the continued investment going to come from? And can budgets grow at the pace and scale to keep up with the need of the organization? So that's the major takeaway. The other thing that I would call out is new to this year, we have added in more of a focus on generative AI as well as data. We also added in new this year ERP and blockchain. And so perhaps unsurprisingly, given it's hard to be in technology without talking about AI and generative AI as synonymous with digital these days, most organizations, more than 65%, are investing in generative AI, and over 75% of them think that they're getting value from those investments. And so an important part of that will be, to the earlier discussion, determining, what is the strategy behind those investments? Is it more operational strategy or is it more external facing product strategy? And what does that ROI really mean? And some of the other areas we see high investment in are areas like data management as well as data architecture to make sure that you have the right structures in place to move these strategies forward.
And what the general message here seems to be that year over year, there is a increased confidence that these investments are actually returning value, right? There's an increased confidence, like almost on everyone. But then there is a little bit of a concentration in terms of the investment itself. It feels to me like there is that less organizations are reporting that they're investing in technologies like traditional AI, for example, a year over year. Maybe that's I don't know if there is a rationale behind that concentration.
We didn't ask, but I think our hypothesis has been that there's only so much money to go around. And so the budget for generative AI as this new line item has to come from somewhere. And so if you think about, these technology trends, even though we've asked about them nice and neatly here individually, very often these spends are integrated, right? So part of that spend may be coming from cloud data budgets. Part of it may be coming from traditional AI budgets. You may be feeding your Gen AI strategy with your ERP data. So I think we also need to be thinking about this as integrated, and that some of that traditional AI budget is very likely feeding the Gen AI need.
Yeah, I mean, the way I've always looked at it, at least hypothesis-wise, is one, Gen AI is crowding out the rest, which shouldn't surprise us on fixed budgets. But two, just heightened scrutiny anyways, that the denominator is going down, or at least get more out of it, just running after or, tech for tech's sake is no longer on the table. So, we were heartened by it, to be frank, in this type of view, that at least we're seeing some of that shift.
Very good. So I'm going to move us forward on the slides, and I'll hand it over to Iram to talk about some of the barriers and the success factors.
Thank you, Diana. Now, I want to continue that thread of value that Diana discussed on the last slide and talk about some of the barriers and success factors that organizations might be witnessing as a part of their digital transformation journey. So, I want you to focus first on the left side, which is the barriers part. So, on one hand, we just saw Diana speak about how respondents are perceiving that year on year, their digital investments are generating higher value in 2024. But on the other hand, here we see that the challenges to gaining that ROI have also intensified year on year. Sure, the rapid evolution of technology brings in new opportunities for growth, but keeping up with that pace is also becoming increasingly challenging, especially for the unprepared. So, we asked our respondents about 10 challenges, as you can see here. The top four are the ones that we repeated year on year, and the bottom six are the ones we introduced new. And we see that all the four barriers that we asked about again in 2024 were more elevated, and in some cases by as much as 20 percentage points. What's not surprising though is that in this age of data and Gen AI, the top barriers, as you can see, are legacy systems and tech debt, lack of a transformation strategy, and security concerns. This might also be because some of these older systems were likely built for an era where scalability, open integration, and agility weren't as critical as they are today, especially with Gen AI. Today, legacy systems and tech debt can actively block the adoption of new emerging technologies. They can slow down technology implementations and drive up costs. So, now let's look at the flip side, which is the right side of this slide. We
So
asked
yeah,
about
I just wanted
yeah.
to before you go to the right of the slide, the left of the slide is superbly important for those who are embarking on business case development for their business, for their digital transformation. Like, though this is what you will need to be able to address as your obstacles, right? This is what you will need to address. I love this. So what you're saying is that legacy systems and tech debt is number one barrier across all industries. I'm going to assume geographies. I'm going to assume organizational sizes. This continues to be number one issue. Number two issue, lack of transformation strategy. I think people are catching up to this. I think we all agree, essential need to have clarity of where we are going and why we are going there before they start making investments in technology, right? Uh, and then security, of course, close third. So this is really superbly important for anyone who is thinking about embarking on something like this. Sorry, I cut you off, Iram. I just wanted to make sure we
No.
shine a spotlight on this. It's really important. Back to
Yes,
you.
yes. That's very well summarized, Dalibor. So looking at the flip side, we asked about the most important contributors to their organization's digital transformation success. And not a surprise again, a strong data foundation emerged as the top choice, which is really interesting because we're not seeing modernization of core platforms as the biggest success factor that organizations raised, especially if they are able to get around the barrier of legacy systems dependency. But what we learned was that rather success comes from having strong data foundations and transformation as the fundamental building block. And in addition to a strong data foundation, respondents also gave high importance to a culture ready for sustained change and willingness to pivot if the aspirations of the business case do not align with the reality that's under execution. I'd also like to point out another interesting thing here. There's a gap in the perceived success factors that we noted. So, our prior research that we published back in 2023 shows a tangible connection between technology and strategy positively impacting the market cap. So, there's actual dollar value to be gained if your tech is aligned to your firm's overall strategy. And currently, we see that tech aligned to strategy ranks lower as a critical success factor. So, if you see the 28% blue circle from below, that's tech aligned to strategy, which is currently a little lower in the ranking. And our prior research tells us that the more specific you can be with your business strategy and how technology investments drive them forward, the more you're rewarded in the market. So, to sum it up, these barriers and success factors aren't separate. For every challenge, you'll see there's a strategic countermeasure that can turn it into an opportunity. Or for a barrier that's too large to tackle now, there's always an alternative approach to drive progress.
What is
Which,
what I'm noticing is that on the critical success factor. So what is most critical for your success? Strong data foundation. But when you look at the barriers, data, immature data management capabilities, which will be the kind of related counterpoint, is actually not as high as one would otherwise expect. Isn't that interesting?
yep.
Yeah, though I would also point out if we look at the numbers here, the intensity of the barriers is higher overall than the intensity of the success factors. So the headwinds are a little bit stronger than an organization's perceived ability to understand how to get past them.
Very good. Very excellent point, Diana. Yes. Iram, back to you.
Yeah, so I think with that, our final question now remains that what can tech leaders do to act given this knowledge about challenges and the perceived success factors and the whole digital strategy prioritization? So for that, I would like to hand it over to Tim to highlight some key actions that leaders can take today.
Okay, thank you very much. So we try to put some of this in a bottle, and interestingly enough, a lot of these findings are a bit of the statements we've been making across that journey that I talked about way early on. The first and foremost, though, and Dalibor talked about this a bit earlier, is the pressure test motion. So the assumption is folks on this Zoom are either manifesting, creating a digital transformation because they see an acute need for the enterprise. They have signatory authority on ultimately the funds that go to it. They're going to lead it, whether or not it's bequeathed to them or not, or they're just a very interested in party in seeing that digital transformation shows up well for the enterprise. Whatever it is, what we've been trying to do with this view, especially the view a year and a half ago, maybe, just the entire narrative is to give you, again, this sort of checklist to increase the odds of success. So pressure test to us means asking these tough questions at the onset of any of these digital transformations that come your way. One is looking at the levels in the spectrum, as I was alluding to. If you're looking at AI to actually change your offerings overall and how you monetize them, et cetera, is someone who is in the IT department really the best overarching lead for that? On the flip side, if someone is saying that they're going to go quite bold regarding using a hyperscaler to modernize sort of their data estate, yet we know that the data is so widespread, do you feel comfortable that any business case, any plan that they have acutely addresses that? Another example is, again, on the ability to perhaps modernize your technology estate proper and say the only way we're going to be that nimble in the face of all these digital transformation moves is we're going to reduce our footprint and go all in, on one platform. Can you do that? Do you have a lot of monoliths or mainframes that are out there to get it done? So part of what, even with the last slide, was trying to show was that checklist that you can start burning through to say, hey, do I accurately account for these? B, are they something that you can even model in a lot of your business cases? And C, if they're not something you can model, have you built in the appropriate agility such that when you discover what's really up with it, as you sort of touch the third rail to try to modernize a certain domain, can you adjust, right, in a way in which the funding flexes up or down with it? So the pressure test motion is, again, making sure that ambitions align with reality. And if anything comes out of all of this, because there is no one unique solve for digital transformation, that stands out.
Yeah.
Now, the second one is just right sizing overall. It is about finding the leaders that understand the technology, sure, but understand the potential even more so. Understand what I could do ultimately to people, how they execute, but the overall, future posture of the enterprise, if you adopt it and adopt it well, finding folks that are going for technology only as to a solve for a business problem is what you want, not finding folks that are chasing a logo for logo's sake. It just lowers your odds. As Iram alluded to, there's actually some pretty crunchy natural language processing, data science, or you want to slice it, work that we've done across a host of 10Ks for 10 plus years that prove that point as well. That there's got to be real coherence to get right. The third is the incentives themselves. Like, look, digital transformation is kind of what you do as an enterprise these days. It's sort of in the lifeblood of just moving the enterprise forward and evolving it. But they're still going to get special focus to get them done right. The biggest thing you got to check, and some of this overlaps with the pressure test, is the incentives that are set. The folks that you find now who may have signed up for the digital transformation may not be those same folks a quarter or two from now, because their incentives might change. The market might have pushed them differently, et cetera. How are you comfortable that this will stand the test of time and is not totally brittle or totally tied to the leaders that signed off it at the onset? So figuring out those incentives, and even we asked this even with the CEOs, seeing how those incentives can be set top down and sustained, super important, because again, when we talk about why digital transformations fail, there's a body of research, Deloitte and beyond. The prime reason why they run into trouble is because the incentives are out of whack. And then last but not least is just the pivoting in and of itself. These digital transformations, if someone is saying we're going to get it done in 3 years and let's hold our breath, there's a way that we can do this. It's more modular, built on agile principles that you would expect, whether it's more the technical delivery or just the broader getting it right from a change and business model offering perspective. Figuring out how to chunk that up into minimally viable solutions, and then using that to build momentum to the next. All of those help you avoid the common pitfalls that we have found, which is, number one, teams expecting the promise of digital transformation to just come because the right technology is getting bolted in. The second, finding leaders who are running for a digital transformation vision that is too tied to an ultimate solution, as opposed to really addressing sort of the signature problem that the enterprise has, no matter what the technology is. And then third, because again, it's so hard to predict these things, these are material bets by the enterprise, allowing yourself to adjust, not just by the leaders you have in place, not just by the teams that you have in there, but even the funding mechanisms themselves. So that's a bit of a capstone as to the research and some of the big takeaways, and we can pivot wherever.
This is fantastic. And thank you so much, Diana, Tim, and Iram, for your time and for this wisdom that you shared with me and the audience today. This is the, of course, QR code that will get everybody right onto the Deloitte Insights, where you can extract all of that research. I would like to just announce that tomorrow, on Wednesday, January 22nd, I will have the pleasure of welcoming Mike Bechtel, Deloitte's Global Chief Futurist, and the lead author and editor of Deloitte's Tech Trends. So tomorrow on this same channel at the same time, noon Eastern, we are going to be unveiling Deloitte's latest Tech Trends 2025. So I would like to invite everybody, please register and come and join me tomorrow. Now, of course, you all know who the characters and faces are attached to these names that you will find as signatories of many of these research papers. So please, of course, if you'd like to furthermore introductions, please feel free to contact me. I'll be happy to pass on the names and contact information. With that, I would like to thank you all very much for your time. Thank you all very much for your patronage. And I would like to wish you all a very happy Tuesday. Diana, Tim, Iram, thank you. All the best to you.
Thanks,
Thanks so
Dalibor.
much.
Always. Thank you.
Bye-bye.